Battlefield 3 was released on the 25th of October 2011. That was 8 years ago. Battlefield 3 was considered as the best Battlefield in the franchise by many, and it was also the first Battlefield game for a lot of players. It set the tone for what proved to be a really solid few years in the franchise. Who would actually be happy with a Battlefield 3 remaster? I certainly would, and I think the proof is already there to see. People still play Battlefield 3. It has consistent player numbers, loads of active servers, and core communities that log in every single day to enjoy what many consider the finest Battlefield experience still available. The game has become more specialised and refined over time, as players left over are usually either 3,000 hour veterans or new players trying the game out for the first time. This is common with any game that has been so popular over nearly a decade. Even with that to contend with though, going back and playing BF3 after such a long time away was a real pleasure. I was smiling from ear to ear for 2 hours straight as I lost myself in this epic experience. Sure, there are loads of bits of BF3 that don't quite work for me, and I think that they have dated a little bit over time, but for the most part, how many games can you go back to 8 years after release and still find an online multiplayer game, jump into a full server and just get straight into an incredible experience? How many hours have you actually spent in Battlefield 3? Let me know down in the comments below, and leave a like if you enjoy playing Battlefield 3. I want to see how many Battlefield 3 fans we have on this channel. I know there are loads of BF4 fans because that's when the channel started, but I created this channel in 2015, so Battlefield 3 had kind of already had its major moment in the spotlight. How many of you are still playing Battlefield 3, or are you just still a fan that goes back from time to time? Battlefield 3 moved quite far away from the previous Battlefield games and really built on Battlefield Bad Company 2 in quite a few ways. All-out war in loads of different locations with a focus on 64-player rush and conquest modes. It was considered by many as the ultimate Battlefield experience and received so many positive reviews. Most people who want a Battlefield remake always vote for BF3. Now check out this community post I made a few weeks ago on YouTube. There is absolutely no contest when it comes to the remake people are after. I do think sometimes you have to be careful when it comes to a remake. Yes, you're going to have something that you can play again even all these years later. DICE wouldn't have to change a whole lot. Maybe they'd change the netcode, better servers, a couple of weapon balances here and there. But overall, I believe that the best thing DICE could do for BF3 is just update the servers and push it a little bit on their social media. Just get the player numbers back up to 20 or 30,000 on PC. That's all it would need, because the game is still really good fun. Having a remake might be actually a little unfair to BF3 that's held up for 8 years solid. Looking back at the maps in Battlefield 3, I do have a few favourites. I have a few guilty pleasures in there as well that some people think, well, it's not really my cup of tea on Battlefield 3, but for me, I think that's what the game does the best. My favourite map, by far, I think, has to be Damavan Peak. It is perfection on Rush. It's one of the best maps in the franchise, with a mode like Rush just fitting it perfectly. That bass drop, wow, what an experience. I can go back and play that today, and I feel as if Battlefield 3 Rush is hectic, but Damavan Peak almost works better than any other map because people just want to get to the base drop, so they will actually attack. Sure, you get snipers camping at the top of the hill near the base, and the helicopter can also do a lot of work for the defenders, but for me, I'm just rushing down, trying to get the objectives capped and trying to get to that base jump. It's so much fun. Even on Conquest, the map works pretty well too. Seine Crossing, really fun. Sometimes it can get quite grindy on Rush, but it is great overall, and you have lots of flanking routes, lots of opportunities to produce really epic plays. The vehicles are pretty fun, and there's that verticality as well through the apartment buildings. It worked well on other modes besides Rush, but for me, Rush was really where it excelled. 64-man Rush, it's so hectic. Not everyone enjoys that, but for me, it's one of the games where I actually enjoy that attrition, screen-shaking, crazy gameplay. I don't know, it might just be a guilty pleasure of mine, but I have to admit, I do really like it. Grand Bazaar Anyone who's played Grand Bazaar will know why people rate it so highly. It's a map worthy of a remake in a future Battlefield game, in my opinion, if DICE ever go back to that part of the world with a DLC or game. I think that Grand Bazaar on Rush, again, it's one of those that can be quite grindy but really good fun, with the 2 main lanes that you can push through. And Conquest is just great fun as well. And finally, probably my 4th favourite map on the game is Caspian Border. It's classic Battlefield, remade in BF4, but it never quite reached the heights of Battlefield 3 Caspian. For those wondering about whether there are still active players on Battlefield 3, here's a look at the servers on PC at least. Loads of people still online, and it's not a bad time to check it out. Sure, we've got content coming soon with Battlefield 5, but BF3 players tend to always play BF3. And the ones that haven't moved on, well, they're not going to move on for an update in BF5, so get back on there and check it out. When it comes to map design, I think the developers did a really good job designing specific modes that played well on certain maps, instead of trying to shoehorn modes onto maps like we saw in Battlefield 4. Damavand, as I mentioned before, is the ideal example. It was perfect on Rush, and also pretty good on Conquest. It was linear. They realised this and they made it work for Rush. That was what they really wanted it to launch with, that perfect Rush experience. The scale of the maps were also great. I was actually watching a video made by Westy a few years ago when he went back and revisited Battlefield 3, and he hit the nail on the head, saying that the maps in Battlefield 3 are actually massive, or some of them are at least. Damavand Peak, when you think about how many sections you have for Rush, is really, really large. Yes, it's linear, so you don't have that size to the side with some larger maps that maybe we saw with DLCs in Battlefield 3, but overall, it's a really impressive map with so many different things on it, lots of variety, great scale, lots of detail, and it almost seems to be a map that just gets more interesting the more you play it, if that makes sense. The weapons feel superb. Sure, there are some really quite strong ones, but I rarely find myself dying to just one weapon again and again, like in Battlefield games that have come since. There's a big variety, lots of attachments. The unlock system's a little bit convoluted at times, and I find myself struggling to work out what I'm unlocking when I start playing the game again, but it's fine. They're literally nitpicking at issues with the game there. The weapons feel great, they sound great, everything about it is just great fun. The netcode and servers are honestly trash, but hey, it's a small price to pay for something so fun. 10 Hz, that's what they run at, that's really outdated. I just think updating the servers would almost classify as a remake in my eyes and get people playing it again, because we're used to a smoother experience. Even if Battlefield 5 is full of stuttering and hit reg issues at times, overall it is far ahead of what we had in BF3. I'd like to see a remake in terms of updated servers in Battlefield 3. I feel at times as well it's like a hit marker simulator where you die around corners. There's screen shake, grenade spam, it's quite intense, but you always have to pay that price going back to a Battlefield game. And at the time I don't really remember getting too annoyed at any of these things, it's just something that you kind of have to get used to in Battlefield 3 once you start playing it again. Same can be said for the blue tint and the sun flares, and of course the suppression. These are all contentious. Some people love these features, others hate them. I personally, a little guilty pleasure, really like the blue tint, I have to admit it, but the sun flare is quite often blinding and doesn't really have a place in BF3 or any Battlefield game since, in my opinion. Just tone all that stuff down. And also, just check out in the background what the game looks like without the blue tint. I think at the time the game was made, people considered the graphics to be around 5 years ahead of their time. With the blue tint removed, I'd even argue that Battlefield 3 looks on the same level as some other games released in the past few years. I didn't really play too much in the vehicles with this throwback video, as I feel you've probably seen enough vehicle gameplay from Battlefield 4 content, so I focused on the infantry for this video. Vehicles are really strong in BF3 and it was heralded for that incredible vehicle gameplay, but for the most part they were balanced. If the teams were on a similar level, you had orbiting helicopters, jet tryhards and tanks without anything to stop them, obviously dominating the maps, but that's the same for any Battlefield game. I log into BF5 and see people 130v0 in the tank on aerodrome. That's just what's going to happen with vehicles in an FPS. A few more points I want to hit before I finish this video. Battle log. This has been lost in recent titles, but overall I find it a far better way of checking out statistics, joining matches, and even chatting with friends in community-built groups. Social media wasn't all the rage back then in 2011, so Battlelog was a very important way to get platoons together and start playing in the evenings when you got back from work. Problems did start to appear in BF4, with Battlelog causing streamers a lot of issues in terms of stream sniping, IPs showing up and servers getting crashed, and that still happens today, but overall the Battlelog features were really good. I didn't want to talk about BF5 too much in this video, I have linked back to it a couple of times, but DICE could surely learn something from BF3 in terms of Battlelog and the community that we had around that game. Also, how about the voice lines in Battlefield 3? I think BF3 wins hands down when it comes to voice lines in the franchise. Here are some of my favourites that I'm not going to repeat myself, but I'll let the game do the work. They are really, really cool.
Be advised, we are in the shit. We are in the shit. Over.
Here is a debatable point to wrap up the video. What was the better game after all the DLC had been released? Battlefield Bad Company 2, Battlefield 3, or Battlefield 4? It was the golden era of the Battlefield franchise and that modern-ish combat, in my opinion, and I find it really, really difficult to choose. I've played more Battlefield 4 than any other Battlefield game, and I think that it provides a completely unique experience, and despite being entirely broken and unplayable on release, after the final DLC package was released, it was the most fun I've ever had in an online multiplayer video game. Summer 2016 was when BF4 was absolute perfection for me, and nothing has come close. Battlefield 3 was probably the same for a lot of people a few years before that, so which one did you prefer? Thanks for watching this throwback video. Remember, Battlefield 3 is 8 years old, it's an incredible milestone, a few more years and it will be a decade old and still probably full of dedicated players. An incredible achievement, and congratulations to those people that built it. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.